Oh, it's my pleasure. It's really nice to be here with you. Yeah, as you were saying, I'm going to share uh, the story, well, stories behind my book, which is really just my life story. And can you, let me see if I
Yes, we can
can
see that.
hide this side here. Whoops. There we go. Then you'll see a full screen, I think. Okay. Um, yeah, so my book is not advancing. There we go. Okay. My book is called Into the Planet. My life as a cave diver, and I am a cave explorer, explorer in residence for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, and this is my real business card. This is sort of the best way I can describe this myriad collection of things I do to stay in the water. Um, I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a little kid because I grew up in the '60s and watched the Apollo missions and was really inspired seeing that on TV. And it's interesting to reflect on because I remember my mom saying there are no women astronauts and there's no Canadian space program, so you're going to have to find another way to explore. And today, if a young woman types woman explorer into the internet, this is what she sees. It's not very inspiring. And if I zoom in a little bit closer, you'll see what the internet thinks a woman explorer actually wears in the field. So it's kind of crazy. Like we have to search pretty far down to find an explorer that we can identify with, and it's a cartoon, but for me, my work takes me all around the world. I'm so fortunate. Well, right now I'm in isolation, so everything's been canceled for the year. But normally, I travel with a lot of kit. Sometimes on private aircraft like this, and when I have to jump on the commercial aircraft and go through the TSA, especially in the U.S., and I tell them I'm a woman explorer, this is what they say to me. Yeah, right. Woman explorer, come with me. So travel has its challenges, and it's going to have a whole lot more challenges now. But my work takes me around the world to document amazing places like, underneath the ice or even on top of the ice. This is in the Canadian Arctic, in the Northwest Passage, camping on the sea ice. But my work takes me to other places you wouldn't imagine where we would dive, like the Sahara Desert, or underneath the Ural Mountains in Siberia, or even inside a volcano in the Canary Islands. There's dives everywhere. I still do a little bit of teaching and have an opportunity to connect with some amazing people, like this guy, James Cameron. I got to take him on his first cave dives. But my work includes everyday people too. Camping in the middle of Cuba, working with archaeologists, and more often than not with a camera in my hand. So a lot of what I do involves documenting with video and still photography in the places that inspire me most, and that's underwater caves. I mean, these are such remarkable environments, and for me, I can think of no more beautiful place. I think of it like swimming through the veins of Mother Earth. So, a lot of people think about underwater caves and it terrifies them. They can think of nothing but the blackness and the claustrophobia that comes with cave diving. But for me, these water-filled spaces underneath the surface of the earth are museums of natural history. These places contain information about the Earth's past climate. They are portals to the underworld for civilizations that have left behind artifacts and remains. And they're also places where we find the bones of extinct animals. I mean, you'll see by some of this video that some of these spaces are really small, but a lot of caves are absolutely enormous, so large that we could put entire buildings inside of these systems. It's absolutely incredible, and they're beautiful. To me, At times, it's like swimming through a crystal chandelier, and I'm moved by the beauty that I find inside the planet. So, to have an opportunity to go to a place where nobody's ever been before is just an enormous privilege for me. And in these locations, can be the hands and eyes for scientists who can't get to these very remote places on Earth. So, explorers, who are we? We're seekers. And I say we because I mean every one of you that signed on today is a seeker. You're curious, you're interested in exploration. We don't necessarily have maps for these explorations. You and I are the people making these maps so that others can follow. For me, my career in exploration really started in the mid 1990s on this project with the United States Deep Caving Team, where we were exploring the remote mountains in central Mexico to locate what we thought was going to be the world's deepest vertical cave. So inside these mountains, if we slice them open, there are cave systems beneath these, mist-shrouded, rainforest-covered landscapes. And if I just cut into the mountain in this location, you would see 53 miles of passages, like 25 entrances where you can crawl into a little sinkhole and rappel down a waterfall and crawl on your hands and knees through a river inside a mountain. And here, there's over 1,560 vertical meters of passageways. When a dry caver reaches a spot like this, where they have to get in the water to continue caving, a lot of dry cavers aren't interested in going beyond. But for me, that's where the work begins. And in 1995, when we went to this location, we actually thought we might try another strategy and work from the bottom of the mountain upward instead of the top down. We wanted to connect with the most remote location that people had been the year before in 1994. And in 1994, water was really clear in this place. But when we got there in 1995, it kind of looked like a mud hole. So the water coming out of the cave, the water coming down the mountain, everything was mud because of a particularly rainy springtime. So, we did explore a cave. We did do a lot of work. But when you explore a cave, you must also map it to your best abilities. And it's really hard when the visibility is like this. And we did, do some preliminary stip max, but we wanted to do more. And sitting around the campfire, we actually, came up with an idea to build some technology that could map a cave in 3 dimensions. And sitting around that campfire with my expedition colleagues was a real moment in time for me. I mean, everybody there was totally open-minded, versatile, adaptable, willing to collaborate on things that seemed a little bit crazy. And around that campfire, my colleague Bill Stone said, "I'm going to build a device that's going to allow you to map a cave even if you can't see it." Now, 2 years later, almost $1.5 million in fundraising, and after gathering together 150 volunteers, we actually did map a cave, whether we could see it or not. And we did it, we've made the first 3-dimensional map, the first accurate 3-dimensional map of any subterranean space, dry or wet. And that sonar mapping device that I got to drive back in 1997 enabled just absolutely remarkable depths and penetrations. So for me, I was able to go on missions as far as, 22 hours in total. We had to build a whole infrastructure in order to support these dives. For the farthest dives, we had to actually employ 2 rebreathers to give us enough redundancy and safety backup just in case. So that meant driving a mapper or a scooter, wearing 2 rebreathers, carrying a bunch of extra tanks, carrying an abort vehicle, a scientific package. So some, 250 or more kilograms of equipment to swim underwater for these incredible missions. But the coolest thing, I think, in this project was a relatively simple technology that allowed a team to track us from the surface. We were using ultra-low frequency radio beacons and broadcasting our location from inside the planet, so that people for the first time could know precisely where we were beneath their feet. And that changed everything for me. It really turned my job into something that was being very contributory to science and exploration. And up until that point, people had really perceived us as just being like adrenaline junkies out to get ourselves killed. Now, that technology didn't stop there. It actually evolved further, and I've continued to work with Bill Stone since that time. And today, that mapper is now an autonomous, artificially intelligent mapping device that can swim through the cave without me and map as it goes. So it can ping the walls, it can measure its distance, it manipulates its own position, and takes lefts or rights and goes down passages, turns around when it's running low on fuel, and comes back again. So it's incredible to me that this device can now go where I can't go on Earth, and its ultimate destination is to go to Jupiter's moon Europa as a part of a NASA project. So explorers are leaders. We're willing and able to step into the darkness to do things that haven't been done before. Another really cool favorite project of mine was going to Antarctica back 20 years ago, when the largest iceberg in recorded history calved away from the Ross Ice Shelf. So this piece of ice, the size of Jamaica or the state of Connecticut, huge, huge piece of ice, broke away. And we wanted to go down there, climb it, see how wildlife traveled with the iceberg, and then be the first people to cave dive inside an iceberg. But first we had to get there, and we had to do that by making a 12-day crossing from New Zealand across the Southern Ocean. But we did indeed find these hypothesized iceberg caves inside the B-15 iceberg and other places, and managed to explore these very remote locations. But you know, you don't know what you don't know until you get there. So every day was a constant revisit of the rules. We had to be adaptable. There were so many dangers that we faced, and so many environments that we couldn't even predict the kind of conditions that we were going to experience, from ripping currents to, you know, pieces of ice that were breaking away. In fact, on my last dive, just after my last dive, moments after getting out of the iceberg and setting up my gear to get ready for another dive, this amazing thing happened. The entire iceberg that we'd just been inside of, like this space that you're seeing here, actually exploded. The whole thing broke into pieces until, as far as the eye could see, all we could see were shards of ice on the horizon from this environment just being completely destroyed. So absolutely breathtaking to see what you see here, just blocks of ice, everything destroyed. But explorers are resilient, and at the time, I thought that we'd failed because, the cave we'd just been inside that we were working on and trying to get footage for National Geographic was now gone. And I thought, man, we haven't got everything we need for the story. We haven't got everything we need for the article. But I realized that these things that we perceive as failure in the moment aren't failure at all. They're just like another one of these milestones in life. And we can turn failure into discovery learning that allows us to take on bigger challenges next time and learn to do things better next time. Now, some of the other scientists that I work with in cave environments, some of the favorite science I get to do is with biologists. And these people are just studying the animals that live inside caves and never see the light of day. So this particular crustacean has no eyes and no pigment because he never comes out of the blackness. Now, here's some swimming in jars, these are called remipedes, they actually have venomous fangs and pincers and can attack something 40 times their size and immobilize it, turn its guts into jello, and kill it over time and eat it. So these animals haven't even evolved in over 65 million years, and yet they're living in these younger cave environments, caves that might be only 100 to 150,000 years old. And that leaves us with a lot of questions. How did the animals get there? Did they, swim up from the depths, from deep ocean vents? We actually went to Bermuda to try and answer that question by doing some of the deepest man dives in Bermuda's history off the Bermuda Bank and off the Argus and Challenger seamounts, where we descended almost 500 feet deep to look at these locations where previous sea level stands used to be on planet Earth. And we looked for paleo caves and animals in those locations. Now, diving in Bermuda can have its challenges, especially when you got to dive with this much gear, because you can't even rent a car in Bermuda. So we have some fun travel challenges, borrowing vehicles when we can or shuttling gear on scooters. We have the same issue in Cuba, since you can't rent cars there. It's actually easier to rent an entire chartered bus than it is to rent a car. But fortunately, a lot of the Cubans will pick up hitchhikers, so that's kind of fun. You never know what you'll see driving down the road in Cuba. And explorers are collaborators, so we're willing to step outside the box, do unusual things, connect people, ideas, and collaborate with folks. Now, I collaborate with a lot of archaeologists and paleontologists too, all over Central America and beyond, but a lot of the work is in Central America, in places like this. So in this photo, we actually descend down from the top of the photo where the light is, down a rope. So we rappel from a drinking water well. So above this photo is a little drinking water well with a wooden pump handle. So we kind of squeeze down through the hole, rappel down, and get into the water. And we're interested in that debris mound that you see at the bottom of the picture and everything that has ever fallen down from that well or from the ceiling of the cave. And when we climb down that debris mound, we find things like, the remains of cattle, and even some really interesting ones like this cow skull that actually has silver applied to the cow's teeth. So this is actually a Mayan artifact. We also find Spanish colonial water-carrying vessels, and we also find ceremonial pottery that would have been left behind by Mayan people. So lots of different things. We also find the remains of Mayan people themselves. So in this case, these skulls were either part of ceremonial rituals or like for beseeching their gods for rain at a time of drought, and in some cases they're part of funeral practices. Now, a lot of artifacts we find in caves are so much a part of the substrate of the cave itself that it would be impossible to take these out of the cave for paleontologists and archaeologists. And we don't like removing materials at all, quite frankly. We prefer doing our documentation in other ways that doesn't impact the objects. And so today we actually scan artifacts in place without ever touching them, and we bring the data out of the cave instead. This is a skull of an extinct sloth that's no longer around, and we also scan entire cave shelves where we can see artifacts besides other materials, and the archaeologists can then understand the context of the things that we've seen. And today we can also display these scans in a much more compelling way using technology like holograms. So in this case, I'm wearing a Microsoft HoloLens, and if you were wearing this pair of glasses, this is what you would see. So what you're looking at is a holographic representation of an Ice Age bear that we scanned inside a real cave, and you're actually seeing the real cave, that black hole behind the virtual shelf unit there is where we descended down to scan that bear's head. So we can share this information with people like our Mayan guides so that they can see the remains of what were probably their ancestors. Now, a lot of people ask me, you must be fearless going into caves and doing these things that you do. And I like to tell people that I am not fearless. I think that being scared is actually important as a diver. And I want to dive with other people that are scared because it means that they also understand risk and choose to act on it. So I know that when people see footage like this is squeezing through a small restriction in very, very high flow, and the restriction is made of sand. So we almost have to dig our way into the cave. And people say, "Oh my God, that's terrifying. You must be so frightened." And yeah, I mean, before a dive, I'm scared because I want to come home at the end of the dive. But I think about all the things that could possibly go wrong. Getting stuck, getting sand lodged in, the orifices and everything else of my full face mask, my buddy getting stuck. So we have to look at all the things that could go wrong and prepare for those in advance so that we know that we have the gear, the equipment, and the personnel to deal with anything that happens. So one place that I work a lot is in the Bahama Blue Holes. I do quite a lot of work with climate scientists, paleoclimatologists, and physicists who are interested in Earth's past climate. And in this case, we can learn a lot about previous dry epochs on planet Earth, because in this cave was dry 4 times in Earth's past history. And these formations happen only when the passage is dry. Now, within these formations, we see some red material like you see in this photograph. It's very clearly orange and red, and what it is dust from the Sahara Desert. So dust from the Sahara Desert blows up into the atmosphere during dry epochs, crosses the Atlantic Ocean, and rains down on Abaco, soaks into the ground, and then ends up inside deposits like this calcite deposit inside the cave. And we can actually take some of these formations out of the cave for scientists who can carefully slice them open and count back through the layers, much like you would count back through, tree rings to the past of a tree's history, except in this case, we're looking at 350,000 years of history. Now, I'm speaking to you today from Canada, and so I'll just quickly share a few images from where I'm from. So there's a lot of diving in Canada, diving that includes wreck diving. So I dive on these World War II shipwrecks that were sunk by German U-boats. And these shipwrecks were carrying iron ore from a significant mine in Newfoundland, Canada, that had a very high grade of iron ore. And the mine itself nearby is also full of water because it's no longer economically feasible to mine. So they just turned off the dewatering pumps, and we now swim along the industrial archaeology to see unique equipment inside the cave or the mine, as well as inscriptions left behind by the miners themselves. There are even some pretty ominous inscriptions, like there's a little arrow in the top left, or sorry, a little cross in the top left of the screen on the wall, and that's a place where a miner would have lost his life during the course of mining. So 106 miners lost their lives while working here, and so we find these crosses all over the place. Now, if I go to the other side of Canada, to the west coast, we have quite a lot of diving with big animals. That's our big animal area. And one of my favorite things to do is to swim with the Steller sea lions and the California sea lions. And when we jump in the water, these guys just come running. They're so curious. And they like to nibble and tug. They'll steal a fin. They'll bring you rocks and shells, and they want to sort of play catch, like you throw it and they'll bring it back. And they'll even steal your bubbles and swim around and bring them back to you and spit them back in your mask. I have had a Steller sea lion actually bite through my dry suit. It didn't injure me in any way, but it was a young one with sharp teeth, and I don't think he meant to do that. But it's quite a lot of fun spending time with these curious animals. It's sort of halfway between a pack of puppies and a bar fight. We also have a lot of wrecks on the West Coast, and they tend to be really encrusted with big stuff, big colorful stuff too. This is a Puget Sound king crab, just decorated with beautiful color. So everything is quite vibrant, uh, including like all the rocks are covered with these strawberry anemones, and even most beautiful, colorful urchins even. When I go to the north, I spend a lot of time in the Arctic. I swim and dive with uh, dangerous animals like walruses and polar bears. Recently, I was tasked with jumping in the water with polar bears to catch them swimming from below. And I have to say, having this as the last thing you see as you're desperately trying to get the air out of your BCD is terrifying. These animals are enormous, and they have only one thing in mind when they're swimming at you, and that's to eat you. Their front paws are enormous, and we are diving out of a canoe with a four-stroke engine on it. We have an armed Inuit guide who's driving the boat, but they have to have very fast reactions because a polar bear could sink or get into this boat in a moment and eat you. So we have to have 24-hour bear guards, even in our camp, and we stay in a small 10 by 10 shack, myself and 5 guys, all fighting over one plug to the generator. But we have to stay in a shack in this part of the Arctic, just again as extra polar bear protection, because you have 15 or 20 polar bears a day that are literally predating on you 24 hours a day. We shot a movie called Under Thin Ice that just released last fall. It's sort of making its way around the world. I'm not sure if you can stream it in South Africa or not, but do give it a search. We do have an app called Discover the Arctic that's free on Mac and Android platforms. You can definitely get that online for free. But the Arctic is beautiful. It's just as colorful as the West Coast. And if I didn't, tell you that this water temperature was minus 1.8, you might think it's tropical. It's so beautiful. But I love not just what's on the seafloor, but I love the sea ice as well. And the icebergs are just something amazing to see. The scale of this is off the charts. You can actually see a tiny little diver about a third of the way up the frame in a shot. And in the rest of Canada, there's so much more too. I mean, we have more coastline and lakes than any country on Earth. And so last year, I finished a goal to actually dive in every province and territory of Canada, a goal that has taken me a lifetime to complete. And so I went all across the country just to find these remote places and jump in. But I grew up in the Great Lakes, where we have, hundreds of, well, thousands actually. There's an estimation of 25,000 shipwrecks in the Great Lakes, and many of these are in very good condition, 200-year-old wooden shipwrecks, as well as, more recent wrecks in very diveable recreational and tech ranges, and with beautiful, beautiful water quality. And if you jump outside my back door, that's what you would see until a few weeks ago. Um, but I think the most important message that I want to leave with you from my presentation is that I'm not fearless, and that I hope that you're not fearless either. That we are all a part, of the experiences that we've had in our life leading up until now, and we can never change any of those experiences. But what we can change is what we do with them. Those experiences absolutely inform who we are, what we can do with these things. So that's the number one question that especially kids ask me. Like, they want to know if I'm afraid, and I tell them, yeah, I'm afraid. Please, step into the darkness. And if you never go on a cave dive, that's fine. But in whatever you do in life, be willing to step into the darkness, because that's where you have the opportunity to experience discovery and be an explorer like me. And that's where you have an opportunity to, do something that nobody's done before, or at least something that's new for you. So that's really what encapsulates my life as a cave diver. It's been a lot about stretching and expanding my horizon, facing fear, embracing it, and making discoveries. So I'm going to stop the share there so that we have a chance to chat and answer some questions for you.
Right, Jill, that was incredible. Thank you. I'm going to just kick off over here and read through some of the questions that have come in so far. Starting off with mine, I know he's desperate to ask you this. Do you still have bucket list dives that you want to do?
Well, yeah, I don't really think of them as a bucket list because I kind of pinch myself. I mean, I get to do what I love every day, except for the last few months. I'm shut in like you. But yeah, I have places I want to go all over the world. In fact, South Africa is one of them. I have not made it to Sodwana Bay, and that's a place I want to go.
Let's see. There's a lot of comments and not questions. What was your most memorable dive, from Glenn?
Wow, there's been so many. I mean, being inside an iceberg and being trapped inside an iceberg was pretty memorable. Memorable in a sense of joy, though. I had a chance to jump in the water with over 100 humpback whales out in Newfoundland, Canada, and it was so overwhelming. I stayed in the water for 5 hours. I didn't want to get out. I mean, how could you stop, right? With moms bringing babies around, and oh my gosh, I'll never forget it.
Really privileged. From Amanda, what sort of qualifications would you need to cave dive?
So to start a cave diving class, you need to, get into technical diving. So because you'll be using a double tank configuration of, side mount, back mount, or CCR cave. So you need to be comfortable in a doubles or, double tank configuration. You need advanced training. Rescue qualification is a good start. Nitrox, and, some experience in deeper stuff. And as you go through the cave program, you'll need to have a bit of background in decompression procedures as well. So, a little bit of legwork first before you get into cave diving, but it's a process. So you can do a little bit of education that you're ready for, take a break for a while, gain some more experience, and then continue on in the process. So it's not something you have to go all, full bore into. And there are a lot of people that take a cave diving class just to improve their skills and abilities and never intend to be a cave diver, although few people, once they've actually tried it, can walk away from it. You kind of get hooked.
Right, from Oliver. I've read your book and I just couldn't put it down, of course. It was excellent. When you talk about those projects where you're sleeping in tents for weeks at a time, hot as hell and long days diving, how do you maintain the mental ability and motivation to continue, especially on demanding dives?
Yeah, fieldwork's really funny. They say that the two best things in life are leaving home and coming home, right? So there are a lot of expeditions I can look back on that are I have really fond memories of now, but at the time it really sucked. It was really hard. I mean, I've been in the Arctic when my tent is full of water and I roll over in my cot and my cot is sagging just enough that my sleeping bag and my butt just wick up all this ice cold water that's now in my tent. And in moments like those, I just want to cry and be home. But I always tell myself, I'll never get a chance to do this again. I will never have another chance. I gotta, soldier through and embrace the moment, because I know a few months down the road, I'm going to wish I was back in that tent soaking wet.
Yeah. And then a very nice little write-up over here. I'm not quite sure how to say your name. Komocho. Oh my goodness. I love how you tell these stories, Mrs. Heinerth. I'm a marine navigator and I've been all over the world, but listening to you makes me feel like there's a whole new world I've yet to explore. I need my have these kinds of experiences. Thank you for your storytelling and taking us on a journey.
Oh, thank you for that. I hope we're all going on journeys again soon.
From Amanda again, it might be a different Amanda. Do you need to do side mount and a rebreather course for this? Guess recreation would not work. Do Do you use a dry suit for this type of work or a normal wetsuit?
Yeah. So as a recreational diver, you can get a little taste by taking a cavern diver course in a single tank and figure out, is this an environment that is inspiring, that's going to make you want to do more? And if the answer is yes, then you can jump into either a back mounted twin set or side mounts or a rebreather, any, technical configuration, get training in that, and then move on to cave diving if it inspires you. But we always use tech equipment for cave diving because everything has to be solved in the overhead environment. We don't necessarily have to use dry suits. So and most Mexican or Bahamian cave divers, for instance, are in wetsuits. Just depends on your water temperature. Almost everything I do is in a dry suit. I wish it wasn't always, but that's just because of where I live.
Right, then from Tanya, what an inspiration you are, Jill. Looking forward to reading your book.
Oh, nice.
From Glenn, do you get paid to do your work? I see some plotting going on here.
Yeah.
Travels.
So I have a hybrid career, I call it, which means I'll do anything to stay in the water. You might be surprised that my official education is in fine arts. So I used to own an advertising agency, and I probably made the most money of my life in my early 20s. And I left that all behind, and I sold everything because I thought, I got to find a way to be creative underwater than not, So I have made this a career, but I've made it a career by being a writer, photographer, underwater videographer, consultant, speaker, everything else. So like many of you right now, I'm not getting paid to do a thing other than a few writing projects I have on the go. But I'm always scrappy, finding a way to put food on the table, and it's worth it. I'd rather have the experiences and the joy in life and a very simple existence than the existence I had when I was working indoors all day. That just didn't fit for me.
Okay. Yaku, take us through your mental process when you're in a challenging crisis underwater or crisis situation.
What a great question. Thank you so much for that. So I've had some pretty big scares. So imagine at one point I was in a cave. I had guided a scientist into the cave, and the cave is no taller than the space underneath your bed. The scientist was going for some important algal samples. So I'm guiding the scientist in, and as we turn around in this very small space, the scientist got disoriented, panicked, entangled in the guideline, and then broke the safety line connecting us to the exit. So I'm in a space like under your bed. I'm holding on to the ankle of the scientist. I got my other hand on the guideline, which is when the guideline broke. So now I've got a broken guideline and a scientist in my hand. And I realized in that moment, if I don't calm us both down, the two women are going to die in this cave today. I can't see, there's no visibility, and all I hear is screaming and shaking in one hand and a broken guideline in the other. So that's a big problem, right? And big problems are impossible to solve unless you break them down. So what I do in those moments is I take a really deep breath, because my heart starts to race, my breathing starts to go up, and that's a really bad time. And in that particular dive, like after digging the scientist out of where she was stuck, one of my two side mount tanks, the regulator was so full of clay that it started to free flow. So in order to breathe, I had to turn the tank on and off for each breath. So I take a deep breath. I literally center myself, and I tell those chattering monkeys in my head, I'm like, emotions, you won't serve me right now. And I remember having a couple fleeting thoughts of, two women can't die in a cave. This will be international news. And I remember also thinking, oh my God, I have to get out of here. Robert doesn't know how to do the taxes. So all of those distractions you have to get out of. So turn off the emotions, take a deep breath, and then just focus on the next best step. And that's the key. You can't solve the big problem. You cannot even picture yourself outside of this cave. You can only solve one thing at a time. And so just do that one thing. What's the next best thing I can do? Calm down the scientist, dig out the scientist. Okay, now she's free. Now I'm going to patch the guideline. Oh, well, now my regulator's not working. Okay, well, now priority one is going to be turning the tank valve on and off to breathe. Now, I actually lost track of her, because in the silt out, when I got the guideline patched, got her on the guideline, put a line arrow, like a navigation marker in her hand, I lost track of her. And so I then had to go, whew, I have to go back further into the cave to make sure I'm not leaving her behind. Now is the time to use my reserve gas responsibly, go further in until I'm positive I haven't left her behind, and then do a slow sweep out of the cave. And because of that, we both made it home that day. I made it out of the cave 73 minutes after her. So the emergency had been called and people were already on their way to recover my body, thinking I wasn't going to make it. But if you just focus and do one small thing at a time and stick to the rules, everything that I did that day was a skill that I learned in a cave diving class. It's all I needed to do was apply the skills that I had been taught in my very first class.
Wow, that's incredible. A question from Mike. Is your book readily available in South Africa, which you possibly don't know, but is it available online yet?
Yeah, so I think it's available everywhere through Amazon. It's usually the easiest thing. It's available as a hardcover, as an audio book, and as an ebook so far. But Amazon's been the biggest distributor internationally, anyway. And the paperback's coming out at the end of the year, so that's going to follow.
Yeah. Excellent, and I can highly recommend reading it. It's a fantastic book.
Thanks. Yeah, and I'm the narrator for the audiobook if you prefer listening.
Thank you so much, Jill, for your inspirational talk from the Old Mutual Dive Club in Cape Town.
Oh, nice.
There's an invitation from Cape Town. Cape Town's also good diving, and we have nice wines and topside conditions. And even the caves for a dry checking dive.
I need to come visit. I have a lot of flight credits now. I have a whole year of projects that have been canceled, so I've got boatloads of like credit on my airline account if the airlines make it.
Yeah. We've got lots of invites coming. Jill, if you come to South Africa, you must swing by Cape Town to experience our underwater world.
Yay.
Can Jill, from tomorrow, recommend any ice diving locations for non-professionals that are open to the public? It's a bucket list dive of mine. I'll join you, Tam.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, around here in Canada and in the northern US, there's a lot of people that do ice diving classes in the winter time. Of course, ice is getting to be less and less predictable, but the best place, the coolest ice dive that you'll ever get a chance to do, that I would highly recommend, is to go to Newfoundland. So at this time of year, like right now in Newfoundland, the sea ice is breaking up in the Arctic, and giant icebergs come drifting down Labrador and Newfoundland, the east coast of Canada. And you can go out, you can dive those shipwrecks I was showing, you can dive the mine if you're a cave diver, you can see the whales, but you can also dive around the icebergs with Ocean Quest Adventures. They're a really great organization. And iceberg diving is it's sporty, I have to tell you, because you got to wear a helmet in case something breaks. You don't want things to fall on your head. We have to be very careful about picking the best possible berg, but there's still a certain amount of risk that it's going to calve or roll or break. But when you get underwater, we get underwater away from the iceberg and then swim to it underwater and do our dive. And then when we're done, we swim away from it, shoot a lift bag, and then come up, because the icebergs are bobbing in the ocean, which means they're creating these up currents and down currents that are breathtaking. And also the freshwater iceberg is melting into the saltwater. So the mixing salt and freshwater, the different densities, the halicline, is also contributing to those up and down currents and weird buoyancy things. So by the time you get back and you get on the boat and you look at the log of your dive, the profile is really ugly. And as a result, we try not to do deep decompression dives on those free floating icebergs, because you don't really have a lot of decent control over your buoyancy at the end of the dive. So we keep things super conservative and recreational, but it's the coolest thing that you'll ever see. It's beautiful.
Gold, thank you. That was incredible. From
Yeah.
Hein, a very good question. Where do you start to get involved in exploration diving?
Well, for me, it all started with volunteering. So I volunteered to help out on a project with Dr. Bill Stone. I worked hard, and then during that project, we planned the next one. And so even today, a lot of my projects are not necessarily paid, uh, but the logistics are covered. So I find creative ways. I volunteer for something, I participate in something, I take the pictures and the video, and I make sure that I retain ownership over those. And then I write stories and publish things that happen from the project, and that's how I can justify my time. So there's a lot of weird, creative, sort of, bartering, volunteering scenarios. But really, every door that's open for me started with volunteering and then asking for the gig.
Right,
Yeah.
from Mike, were you in any way involved in the Thai rescue, and what are your thoughts on this rescue?
Oh, wow. So I was in Greenland shooting the movie Under Thin Ice when the Thai cave rescue thing happened, and I received some phone calls, and those are all my best friend colleagues that were on the team. Um, and I didn't go, obviously, because I was shooting a film, but I did do a lot of media for the international news community to try and explain what was going on, because I was in contact with the guys. And I think it's just the most remarkable, beautiful cave diving story. We have a lot of sad ones. So that's a really happy one. And some people don't realize that people went there on their own penny. They spent their own money to fly down there and help out and get involved. And so it's a very selfless exercise. And I have so much respect for the guys. They did an amazing job.
They did, they really did. I've got
Mm-hmm.
Rick shouting at me over here. We are inviting you to Aliwal Shoal. Read this, Karen.
Ah,
um,
all right.
and then, Carl, with what camera setup do you dive with? As one photo, it looked like a monster camera.
Yeah, when I'm shooting stills and I'm taking my own cameras, I'm using a Canon 5D Mark IV in a Aquatica housing, or a Panasonic GH5 in an Aquatica housing. But a lot of the movies that I shoot it's on a different camera every time. So, a RED camera or an RE camera, many different setups. I generally don't own the cinematic camera housings anymore because it's changing too fast. So I will either rent for a particular project, or in many cases, like if I'm hired by the BBC or Nat Geo, sometimes they already have all the equipment lined up, and I'm happier if they travel with it through the airport than me.
Brett has just come up with a cunning plan. Um,
Mm.
if we were to get a group of people together that would like to purchase your book, would you be able to sign a couple of copies and ship them?
Uh, Well, I don't know what the shipping fees would be. It's probably going to be pretty substantial from Canada.
Let me
Um,
get you to come to South Africa and sign them here.
yeah, I think that's what I need to do. Yeah, because I would also sort of say right now that the postal system is not great at the moment. Even just sort of getting our local mail right now has its limitations. So I think you might be better off on the Amazon platform, as much as I would love to do that. So
Yeah.
I think clearly here's another good reason for me to visit.
Yeah. From Greg, thank you. You've just increased my bucket list by many dives.
Oh, good.
Another invite from Swana Bay. Yaku, what is your fitness routine to stay in shape for these challenging dives?
Ooh, nothing about my life is routine. You can just ask my husband. But I do every day. I'm out hiking, walking, cycling. I'm really into cycling. I'm not like, I don't like indoors, so I'm not a gym person. The river outside my house just reached a good temperature for swimming again, so I'll be back swimming for the summer because all the pools are still closed. Yeah. Oh, hey, I just thought of something else. For any of you that own stores in South Africa, if you can buy wholesale books from HarperCollins publishers, you could. Somebody could, maybe get a case that way. It won't be signed, but I'll sign them when I visit. Yeah.
Yeah, this is all interesting. I think that's it for most of the questions. So I've got messages coming in on different platforms here. Okay, you've got several volunteers for any expeditions willing to.
All right.
So there's a couple of buttons you can push on over here.
Yeah.
Jill, I'd like to say thank you so much. I really,
Oh.
really appreciate your talk. It was incredible. If I can ask you a favor, which I haven't discussed with you,
Yeah.
next week we're going to have Calvin Murray chatting about polar and expedition diving, inspirations and respiration. Could
Mm-hmm.
you give him a 1-minute introduction? You know him, I don't.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. So next week you're gonna hear from. Or you want me to do that now, or do you want me to do it
Yes,
then?
yes. No, no. Just tell me about
Now, okay. Yeah, yeah. So Kelvin managed the logistics for the Five Deeps expedition. So the expedition that Victor Vescovo did, where he went to the deepest place in all the five oceans. So Kelvin, manages the logistics for for that magnitude of diving. It's really fantastic, and his stories are fantastic. He's got an incredible sense of humor. So. Very, very infectious. You're going to really enjoy hearing from him and some of these incredible places that he's helped orchestrate. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'm really looking forward to it. Jill, thank you once again. Excuse
My
me.
pleasure.
There's lots of thank yous pouring in over here. And we really do hope to see you in South Africa. If
Oh,
you're
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
organize a few
Thanks.
meetings and greetings and book signings for you.
That would be amazing. It really would. But in the meantime, everybody, please stay well and safe, and I hope we're all actively back in the water soon. I don't know about you, but my gills are drying up, and that's really tough.
Okay. Guys, thank you
Yeah.
very much. We'll see you all next week.
All right. Awesome. Thanks.
Soon. Thank
Take
you.
care, PJ.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.